over here?
Wherever you want. Give them a second to get ready. All right. Well, thank you all for coming tonight as we prepare to embark on the kickoff of what we call the Eastern Gateway Priority Planning Effort and District Planning Effort around the Eastern Gateway. We'll jump into what the Eastern Gateway is if you aren't familiar with it tonight. But I'm going to go ahead and get started because the intro slide is our project team. So I'm Andrew McNichol. I'm the Community Development Director for the town of Reading. We're served tonight with my peers in Town Hall, Olivia Knightley and Kevin McCarthy from our planning team, Alex Rosicki on the engineering side, and we also have our consultants here, the wonderful Michael Wang from Foreman Place and Jennifer Goldson from JMG. So I want to introduce the team working on this effort because it's an important effort as we prepare to reprioritize needs and opportunities around this district. And first and foremost, this is a community-led project, right? We want to hear from the community. We want to work with the community to address the needs and the opportunity that could be within this district. So what we've done is establish a steering committee to help us steward this project. That steering committee is comprised of 8 residents, 3 of which already serve on boards, 1 being a representative of the planning board, 1 being a representative of the finance committee, and 1 being a representative of the climate committee, all with institutional knowledge. And then we have a handful of other residents with personal and professional experience and interests alike. Majority of them are in the audience tonight. I'm sure you will meet them as we facilitate the discussions tonight. So we're working on our staff side to help steward this project, right? This has been identified in the town as a priority to continue to look at. We've talked a lot about it in the past. We're continuing to talk about it to hopefully advance some work and jump into what that work may look like. But we've contracted recently under a grant with Foreman Place and their subs on Cpdc, which is an engineering company, and JM Goldson to help us steward the public engagement with you all. Really excited to kick this effort off tonight. Let's jump into a little bit about what it's about. So the overall project goals, which you'll find on the left here, is ultimately to culminate in zoning guidelines and land use considerations and recommendations in these districts or overall district. So zoning is a land use tool to encourage future development that you may wish to see on a site and that the town may find a benefit if the site were to be developed in such a way. Zoning controls the use regulations, the dimensional controls such as height, setbacks, parking, etc. And that's really where this effort is guided towards. Let's look at a zoning bylaw and zoning policy that could reflect future development that we might like to encourage in the area. It's also going to pair with visuals, diagrams, and mappings from Foreman Place that they'll put together for us and some site schematics. Those schematics are really intended, again, to help the community and us understand the type of massing, scale, use separations, and connections that ultimately could end up in this area. Again, the first question we usually get is how can you draw over private land? We're just looking at it as an opportunity to say, here's something that we might like to see in the future and hopefully encourage a private development one day to somewhat reflect that vision. We are also partnering with RMLD in this effort to look at their site layout considerations. RMLD has some upcoming facility needs and some improvements that they need to their site layout for their future efficiency, employment, and operations in general. So they've partnered with us as we're looking in this district, since they're based in this district, how can they improve that and really advance their site layout into the future so that they could potentially one day build a new facility in the area. Tonight's meeting goals were really established to encourage project awareness. I'm really glad to see a lot of new faces here tonight. We encourage you to talk to your neighbors, your friends, your teachers, your parents in the school system to make everybody aware of this effort because it is so visionary and there really is a lot of opportunity here to encourage many different things. We want to establish some vision and priority building blocks, which is what we'll do tonight around the room after the presentation. There's a lot for the town to consider here. What do you want to encourage here, right? Is it housing? Is it mixed use? Is it a retail destination like Linfield Marketplace? You want to encourage manufacturing and job growth and keep it in that industrial sense. There's a lot to run through, and we're going to run through the gamut in the process to make sure that ultimately whatever is recommended has been fully vetted and that there's strong agreement on in the community. It is a good thing for the district in the future. And we'll capture your feedback tonight to help us establish the next steps, those priorities, and those building blocks. I will take it very quickly.
If you want to wait, part of your goals is the driving factor behind all this. What is the ultimate you're trying to achieve for the residents of Reading? Because I can cite two examples in the past. One is the Home Depot in that developed area now. There's a lot of, I'm a long-time Reading resident, and there were a lot of opposition to that being built at the time. And for years and years it took to get that developed. Now I think everyone sees how beneficial it's been to the city. I guess most people think that.
Yeah.
The other was Marketplace in Linfield. Only went there because it didn't happen in Reading. A small group of residents who lived near there on the street never went to a town vote to see what the town thought. Those residents stopped it. They were afraid of the traffic. And look what Marketplace has become. We need more commercial tax base here in Reading.
Right.
We take too much of the burden of the residents.
Yep, so that's ultimately the goal, is established with you guys in the community at large what would be an improvement here and what the benefit to the town, because there is always opposition to growth and change in town. It's about mitigating those concerns right in the zoning policy and ultimately showing what is the benefit of new growth and new opportunity, because there is benefit and there is long-term good out of that, whether that's for your tax base, whether that's just as vibrancy in arts and culture and bringing people to Reading. There's a lot of benefit that we'll talk about as this process ensues, but that's the ultimate goal, is find the strengths and opportunity of this area that the many can get behind and ultimately vision for this site. So we've talked a lot about this district in the past. For those who aren't familiar, this isn't necessarily coming out of nowhere. These areas were identified in the 2016 Economic Development Action Plan as priority development areas to encourage new development in them, along with a number of other districts that ended up being prioritized first, right? We focused on downtown. We've seen downtown development. We prioritized Main Street with the mixed-use bylaw. That's seen new applications and new development going on Main Street. We've run some conceptual elements in this district in 2019. That obviously had to pause in 2020 when the pandemic ensued and we reprioritized towards local businesses and existing uses. But we started to bring this district back up in the 2021-2022 timeframe, both in these land use considerations and in transportation, which we'll get into. And now it's all culminating in this 2024 district plan to reprioritize, re-engage in the efforts, and hopefully ultimately spur action that we can come forward with a zoning policy that can one day spur development. It could or could not, but we will ultimately try our hardest that if the community wants something, that we'll try to encourage it through the zoning policy. So this was just a quick context on the 2016 action plan. You can see that it did highlight this area. It did also highlight what we call PDA 4. This is one of the districts we're looking at tonight, and throughout this process, it did market analysis and encouraged some uses through public workshops and facilitations like we are doing tonight. We want to make sure the priorities that we heard in this, right, this was a long time ago now, and a lot has changed in the market too, post-pandemic, that what was reflected in this plan what still makes sense in it, what may not still make sense to encourage in this area, especially given changes on the municipal side where DPW may not be relocating, right? There's a long-term thought that they could relocate to Camp Curtis Guild. RMLD seems intent to stay on the site and potentially look at facility needs there on their own site. And similar can be said for the other side of the tracks down on the General Way Market Basket site. I know Market Basket is a huge draw in town. Nobody is saying that that's going anywhere tomorrow. But ultimately the zoning is a long-term goal that we can reflect on. This was another 2020 vision. This was established in context with the Economic Action Plan. You can see that the town's, again, done a number of things in this vision, like expanding the downtown smart growth district, like looking at affordable housing here, right? That was a 40B development that ultimately did pass in the area. We've somewhat started some conceptual looks at transportation improvements, both in Walkersbrook and the Ash Street side, because we find that there's two things that the town can ultimately control to encourage development. That's the zoning I was talking about, but that's also transportation improvements, because you do need to look at your transportation system and what it is encouraging through its current design. So in 2019, we had looked at the south side of the tracks with another consultant in Gamble Associates. We came out with a number of identified goals and priorities. Again, 2019 now feels like almost a lifetime ago, doesn't it? So we want to, again, reestablish. I think a lot of these goals still make sense, but potentially not all of them, especially in this district. So facilitating the compact development, I think, still remains given its residential neighbors and context. Enhanced walkability and connectivity is always a goal in any district, and we know the challenges with the Ash Street intersection at Main Street. Building community and active public space in that district. RMLD, I think, has done a good job to enhance that site and that streetscape, and how do we continue those efforts if there's future redevelopment there. Attracting and retaining local businesses in that area is ultimately a hard one. That maybe is changing with the RMLD discussions and town discussions. Branding and marketing Reading in this district as revitalization and good use that brings people not just in Reading but outside of Reading to the district so that they can shop in Reading, come to love Reading, and visiting Reading and come again and again and again. Promote public-private partnerships. That seems to still be in place, right? We want to understand the long-term intent of these property owners, our long-term intent, where they overlap, where they're going to start to differ. But ultimately, we looked at this district only, and this effort will seek to expand that Michael will talk about over across the tracks into the rest of the General Way lots. This was the 2019 study, some of the visionary goals to establish better connectivity to this side of the tracks and towards downtown, right? You can see that this roadway doesn't exist today. The extension of Pond Meadow that could come out towards Ash Street. Again, it was just visuals to encourage streetscape connectivity, pedestrian use in the district and in the neighborhood that we're advancing here in this opportunity. The other side of the district is the Walkersbrook corridor. We've done a lot of work in the most recent years to look at conceptual redesigns of the Walkersbrook corridor through grant-funded projects. You can see up here at the top right that what we've done is work with engineering consultants to consider the redesign of Walkersbrook and what that may look like to not just enhance vehicular movement in a safer, more efficient way through dedicated turning lanes, but also wider sidewalks, more pedestrian opportunity. Could you encourage biking from the downtown, biking and walking from the downtown area, down the corridor towards Lake Quannapowitt, especially to, as you add, if we look to add potentially with you guys, as you identify priorities, right? If you're gonna look to build housing along Walkersbrook, mixed use opportunity or retail destination, We want people to get there in different ways and get there safely and effectively and sustainably. And so we've partnered this road design work with this district effort in zoning because those are the two things, again, the town can control, and show that we too are interested in leveraging opportunity to invest in this area and invest in the long-term benefits of this area and how it could be improved from its current standing. We've looked at the other side of the tracks conceptually at the Ash Street intersection. What is some room for improvement there? We all, I'm sure, hate the Ash Street, Bolton Street, and Main Street intersection. It is not very well designed. It is not very effective to get towards the Market Basket area if you're traveling from Main Street. And it's not really effective to get home from Market Basket. So we started looking at that conceptually. Again, want to reprioritize that with you guys. What's some room for improvement with Foreman Place and TEC, and ultimately start that effort just like we've done with Walker's Brook Drive over the long term. Transportation is an investment, right? It is a heavy investment. It takes a lot to design, let alone build it. So we want to be cognizant of that, but we also want to not shut off that discussion because it is indeed a need. So I think that's where my speaking points end, and I'm going to pass it to Mike. I skipped the slide here.
Thank you very much. And let's see. All right, good evening. I've never been introduced as the wonderful Michael Wayne. Hope I can live up to that. In any case, I'm really happy to be with you all tonight, and thank you for venturing out on this crazy weather evening. But again, I'm with Foreman Place, which is a small architecture and urban planning firm based in Newton, Massachusetts. And a pleasure to join forces with Jan Dolson. I've got Jen Dolson here and Austin Smith manning the desk there, as well as TEC will be coming into the mix as we begin to vet concepts for the district. This is basically a slide that just summarizes the goals that were outlined in the request for proposals, the RFP, and especially, Andy, your 5-minute introduction turned into a very thorough 15-minute overview, which was so well done that I think I'm not going to go through my whole preamble in the interest of really wanting to hear from you guys tonight, but basically to say that the focus of the study, again, will be these development planning studies in conjunction with the transportation and zoning work. So you can see, again, the two sections of the PDA here, which is now, for the first time, we're going to be studying together, which is, I think, very exciting. Also want to just point out that on the lower left there, this whole area is in an industrial zone. It also has a PUD, industrial overlay on it. And the criteria that are in that have certain limitations that may not necessarily be ideal for what we're looking as a vision for this area. So we will take that into consideration as we move forward. So what I'd like to do is just give you a few images of the site so you can get oriented on the extent of the district. And then I'm going to show you some precedent overlays. So projects you may know, like Market Street in Linfield and others. Just to give you a sense of the scale of those developments and how they would fit on this site, so you can get a sense of the overall scale here. You can see the purple areas are the two PDA areas that were identified in the Economic Development Action Plan, and the yellow areas are additional parcels that have been added into the mix. The Reading DPW site on the sort of southern section here, what we'll call Plan Southern, was part of the Gamble study in 2019. And it was, parts of it were, but maybe not all the way down to the middle. But in any case, so when you take these areas combined now, you're looking at a little over 50 acres, 55 acres, 25 of which are on the south side of the commuter rail, and a little over 30 on the north side where the Market Basket is. And just the two aerials to get you oriented again, as Andrew commented on, this is taken from over the street looking back at the site, and that that junction of Ash Street and Bolton and Main with the commuter rail going through, and it's quite a loaded area, but it also is an incredibly important area in terms of the connectivity between the site and the downtown, the site and the commuter rail station. And when you think about the the things that were outlined in the Economic Development Action Plan for goals for the PDA, one of them is supporting local businesses and connectivity and walkability. And so whenever you get into an idea about developing a district like this, I'm going to show you another view. There's always concern that whatever happens here is going to be sucking the life out of other parts of the downtown, like the Main Street corridor and the node around the commuter rail station. So part of the challenge is going to be to find something that is very complementary. It fulfills some other needs and does not detract from the other areas in the downtown that are thriving at the moment. And you want them to work together and be walkable and well connected. So now here are just a few images looking, again, I've got the red dashed line around the perimeter of the site here. You can see the commuter rail line going through the middle with the sort of light blue hatch in there. And what I'm going to show you is examples of a couple of projects that you may be familiar with. This being the Market Street in Linfield. And I've sort of rotated it to sort of generally fit it on the site, although it is has a much larger acreage than the site that's being considered here. But you can, just for order of magnitude, you can get the sense that it's approaching 700,000 square feet of mixed use. Granted, these areas that are not necessarily considered part of the marketplace per se, but are the multifamily residential, that are sort of associated with that. They're kind of leaking off the page there a little bit, or off the site. But I think it's just important to see you've got 200 plus dwelling units here, 400,000 square feet of retail, and some office space. But generally, it's kind of a low-rise type commercial environment. It does have a very nice component of having the open space integrated into it, which is something that Legacy Place doesn't really have. I don't know if you all are familiar with Legacy Place down in Dedham. This again is in that same neighborhood of 700,000 square feet, but it's really purely commercial retail. It has an entertainment component. It has Whole Foods as an anchor. It has an LL Bean, but you can see there's a big parking structure that you can also see up at the top there that's above retail, but it essentially does not have any usable open space. It's parking lots surrounding. It has some activated streetscapes with some outdoor dining in places, but it doesn't have that same sense of open space, and I guess I would argue maybe double-loaded streetscapes that you find at Market Street. So these are the kind of things that we'd love to get your take on. I'm going to show you two projects that our firm's worked on recently. This one was a study that we did for the Lupoli companies up in Andover on Dascombe Road. And this is a 600,000 square foot mixed use project on only a 15-acre site. So this is a very intense, vertically integrated project. So you can see the rendering in the upper right there in particular shows you that a lot of the buildings are approaching 5 stories in height. So that's how you achieve that same total square footage of mixed use, yet on a much smaller site. This one also had over 200 dwelling units. In this case, it was proposed to be 55 plus residential. Sort of always trying to deal with the concerns about impacting the schools and all of those things. So that was how that resolved. But anyway, this is organized around a central open space. It's more sort of like a boulevard, some of which can be programmed with usable space. But it's just interesting that you can get this level of development intensity on that size of the site, just for comparison's sake. And you can see it only takes up a portion of the Eastern Gateway District. Another project that you might be familiar with, there it goes. It's the Wayland Town Center project, just off of Route 20 in Wayland, and the plan is turned upside down to fit on the site, but Essentially, you can get a sense here. This is largely a one-story retail main street with some areas where there's some second story above it, but much lower kind of density and scale, appropriate for that sort of historic Wayland context. There is a grocery anchor, and the residential in yellow, sort of again around the perimeter, but it does have a very nice central green, town green that's incorporated, as well as a municipal building fronting on the green. So it has components of open space and well-defined pedestrian streetscapes. And notice it's on a 50-acre site, which matches essentially the square footage of the Eastern Gateway site. It's a little smaller, but it only has 375,000 square feet or so. So maybe half of some of the other projects, and that's because of the height and scale qualities of it. So hopefully that just gives you at least a start for a sense of what kind of development could potentially fit on the site, and depending on the vision that's desired. I'm just going to show you a couple more images that talk more about the process. This is a master plan that we did for mass development a number of years ago, which is now under construction and sort of phased over the years. This is in Belchertown on a historic state school site. This was an initial diagram, and this is kind of what we're going to get to as the next stage of this project, is to begin to think about, how is the site accessed, how is it organized, what uses belong in different places. Andrew, you mentioned the sort of collection of uses that could possibly coexist on the site. The purple, for example, is a light industrial area that is sort of up against a wetland. But there's certain places where logically you can put certain uses, and so they succeed. Like commercial retail really needs to be on the main street here so that it has visibility. You can create sort of a cultural, sort of civic focal point in the middle of the site. And then in this case, we wrapped residential and a continuous care retirement community around the periphery, where you have beautiful views off the mountains to the west. And that's how this plan, or those diagrams, then translate to a plan. So that's sort of the next step in the process, and you can see again the little commercial node there on the street, and then the organizational strategy here. This is a canvas that had Frederick Law Olmsted landscaping on it, so it had some really, really beautiful organizational features, which we tried to respect. But and then you get into the visioning component of it, and I'll show you the visioning piece a little more detail in this last project here, which is one that we teamed on with Jan Golston and with TEC. So I love this team, and hopefully it'll be fun on this effort as well. But this just gives you another sense of some of the diagramming that we've done to begin to explore the qualities in the site. This is a project down in Hull at Nantasket Beach, in an area where it is just all open space right now, and there's a beautiful view corridor from the bayside to the ocean, and there's two sort of almost separated parts of Hull community here, and the idea was to sort of knit these together. These are sites that the Hull Redevelopment Authority had control over, but we did a series of diagrams that looked at view corridors, ideas about gateway, where pedestrian connections were most important, where public transportation might fit in to the equation. And then here's the program diagram, which you do even before we start the planning process. And you think about components like hospitality anchor at the southern end of the site here on the right. And then the idea of a public green here that would allow to maintain that view corridor from the bay to the ocean. And you can see with these various uses, we're getting up about 375,000 square feet on a site that's probably about 12 acres. Sometimes it advances, sometimes it doesn't. And this is how it translated into a master plan for the Redevelopment Authority. And I think it's these images at the top where you can begin to get into the idea about architectural vernacular, what makes a successful mixed-use building to have a vibrant ground floor level with residential above in the case of there. But thinking about it holistically, it's architecture and open space, site design, and how that all knits together. So this is the kind of visioning that we're hoping to do on the site ultimately once we pin down a little more of a direction with your input. And this one is just for, this goes back to the Gamble effort back in 2019 and looking at how they were conceiving of various uses, particularly on the south side of the tracks in this study. But this opportunity to look at the whole district, I think is going to be marvelous. So this is the last slide I'm going to speak to, and then I'm going to hand it to Jen here to sort of talk about what we have on the boards here for your feedback. And these are elements of master planning that I always take with me on every project. They sort of work across the board regardless of the scale of the community and then the project you're working on. And so we've paired these together. So the first collection of boards here, which Jen will go through, have to do with open space placemaking and streetscapes. And there are lots of critical components to what make those successful, including the interface with buildings. And then we'll love to have your feedback on mixed-use development. Residential density is a big thing. You're looking back at your housing production plan from 2023, and it says that 94% of the town is zoned single-family, and 77% of people in town live in single-family residence. And another 11% live in larger multifamily developments that are 20-plus units. So you have those two, ends of the dumbbell that make about 90% of the housing opportunities in town. So I think that is a very exciting opportunity for you to think about what's called the missing middle, and you'll find that on these boards here. Other typologies of residential that sort of fit between those two worlds of single-family duplex and the larger multifamily. I'm going to stop there and let you talk.
All right, perfect.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Michael, do you mind if I ask a couple of questions while you're on there?
Yeah, or we can do it
wait
after.
till the end?
We'll do a quick one, but I mean, what do you think, Jen? Do you want to just...
Well, is it a question of clarity from what he said?
Why don't we keep going and then I'll...
Yeah, why don't we keep going and then see. So I'm Jen Goldson, and Austin and I are with my firm, J.M. Goldson. We're focused on community engagement here. We're also land use planners, and really happy to be here. So I'm going to tell you what you're going to do with all of these, because tonight isn't really about this big presentation that's taken up a lot of your time. It's really about getting your feedback on what is your vision for this area, and what would you like to see. And the way Michael's described these boards, I'll go into a little more detail, but we're basically broke down all different aspects of thinking about a vision for a site like this, and getting your feedback on these various boards. But before I get into that, raise your hand. Did anybody recognize any of those examples that Michael gave? Which one were you familiar with?
The Belchertown one.
The Belchertown one? Yeah. How about, who else raised their hand? Did someone over here? Yeah, how about you? Linfield? Okay, great. Yeah? Kyle?
Wayland.
Wayland? Okay, so a lot of them, yeah.
Legacy Place.
Legacy Place, I am too. I live in Roslindale, so we're there all the time. Anybody else recognize any of them or familiar with? Was that interesting to see, just some of these places that you may or may not be familiar with, and then to see like what is the scale of that on a site like this? Was that helpful to see? Yeah, good. So the idea here is just to kind of prime the pump a little bit, but we're not trying to lead you in any direction. You can see that the examples Michael gave were a real breadth. Some were just commercial or in retail, some were a mix of residential, some even had some industrial uses on it, some were larger, 5-story buildings on a smaller footprint. Some had open space, opportunities, others didn't. So we just wanted to show you a bunch of different examples to start to prime your pumps a little bit. Yes, go ahead.
Any parks in mind or anything along those lines?
Yeah, so that's also...
A lot of density, but nothing really for the neighborhood or the community.
Thank you. That's also a question that we want to put back at you. And on some of these boards, we ask you, how important is open space on this site, parks on the site? And in the back, we'll ask you to prioritize. Like if you could only choose one thing that you absolutely want to have on the site, which would it be? and parks and open space is one of those. So yeah, so that's definitely a question for you all. So, so the other thing that's always tricky about public engagement with a process like this is even though it looks like we're designing something and we're showing you lots of pictures of buildings that could happen, we're actually not designing anything. We're trying to inform zoning. And that will someday inspire or limit or incentivize a developer or multiple developers to do something that might not look exactly like what we're showing in these plans, but because we've written the zoning in a way that will incentivize what you want. Maybe you want more parks that are open for the public to enjoy. There are ways to write zoning to really make that an incentive, or even require, in order to get this much density, you need to give us this amount of park space. So that's ultimately what we're doing, but it's hard to ask people to write zoning. So instead, we ask you to just vision, like, if you could envision what would you like here, then we'll take that and turn it into zoning. Does that make sense? And I know we've all kind of said that in different ways, but it's always a little tricky when we get to this point. People are like, but you said you're going to build this. And it's like, no, actually, we're just doing zoning. Okay, so let me explain what we're asking you to do here. So there are these 8, they're not really stations, but these different boards with photos on them and images. These are the topics that you see with those boards. And then in between these pairs of boards, you'll see this big whiteboard, and not a whiteboard, but a board with a lot of blank space. And that's where what you're going to do is take a Post-it note from the table there. Austin, can you be like... All right, good. So if you're going to take, we've got a ton of Post-it notes there. The colors make no difference. You can take whatever color you want. Some of them are lined, some of them aren't. There are pens over there. Take one of those and walk around. And we want you to look at these boards. There's some questions on there. There's some photos on there. And then what we want is you to write up. You can use as many Post-it notes as you want. You don't have to do it. You can do a big essay on lots of Post-it notes or just a few words. But tell us what you envision for placemaking and streetscapes, for mixed, if you do envision any mixed use or residential. Back here is, I can't really see it. What does it say, Austin? Site design, and what's this one here?
Building design and site design. There's mobility and access and sustainability back in this corner. And then at the final station, we're going to ask you to have kind of a general view of what your vision is for the site at large. Once all these are taken into account, what does it feel in your vision? What does it look like? What would make you want to go there? If someone's coming to town to visit, what makes you want to show this place off when it's fully built out?
Exactly. And so these are just ways to hopefully get your mind going on the different pieces of what a vision could look like. You may spend most of your time on 2 boards, and that's okay if you really want to focus your vision on maybe residential density, or maybe you want to focus it on, the sustainability piece, or you may spend equal time answering, on the different boards. It's totally up to you. It depends on what your priorities are. And the other piece of this, so there's the Post-it notes, but then there are also dots, and they're pinned to each board. You can see all of these photo boards have these dots. And if you want, and this is obviously whatever you want to do, it's optional. You don't have to do the Post-it notes. You don't have to do the whatever you want to contribute is up to you, but we wanted to give you a lot of options. So the idea of those dots are, if there are any reference photos that Michael put on these boards that you're like, oh, I really like the look of that, and I could see that on this site, just take one of the dots and stick it on that photo. And then in your Post-it note, you can say why. You could say, I really like, this one. If you want to know where they are, Michael knows all of them, so we'll gather him up. But I really like this one. And you can write in your Post-it note why, or what are the pieces about it, but not something else. So that's or just a on it.
Just mention one other thing. In particular, of course, they're about site design and building design. And I just wanted to mention, those are really getting at the root of what could potentially become design guidelines. So that's another big component of the zoning process, is to integrate the zoning design guidelines into them so that the town has a certain degree of certainty as to what they're going to see, what the character of the site and feel of the buildings, potentially the architectural vernacular. But it also, you have to balance that with enough flexibility for the private side of the equation to to not have too much of a deterrence in their process, and that gets into approvals and all those things. So in any case, I think just to bear in mind that design guidelines, I think, are also a component of the zoning exercise.
Yeah, that's a good clarification. So I'll go through each of these, and then we encourage you to read them as well. So, and I believe these are going to go in order from
Only a few
placemaking
of them.
over. Okay, a few of them might be out of order, but we start with placemaking. What types of usable, to get back at your question in the corner, what types of usable open space do you most need? Can you envision on the site? The next, this won't click very well.
It's up to the left, I think. Yeah, by computer. Laptop or.
Come on.
It works.
Oh, there it goes,
Sometimes it
okay.
doesn't.
The next one is what design characteristics do you want to see to create walkable, vibrant streets? And then we have, this is getting a little bit at what Michael was talking about in terms of design guidelines. What character or scale or intensity? What do you see here? There's lots of different ways. Some of these buildings here you can see are very tall. Others are very smaller scale. Like what could you envision? Come on, you. What kind of housing, if any, do you want to see here? And what could you envision? Michael was talking a little bit about that missing middle. Like, could you envision townhouses or duplexes, or or not? Or maybe you envision something larger, or maybe you don't envision housing at all. Someone was asking, how important is it to keep more commercial space? And so that's something that we want to know from you. And this darn thing. There we go. General district vision.
That's for the final.
Yeah, okay. Oh, okay, good. And then we just have a guideline about 6 to 7 minutes, but really you may spend more time on some and less time on the others. You don't have to go in any particular order. However, the top priority, you may want to do some thinking first. I'm not going to mandate that you do that. Of course, if you want to go right to the priority and you know it, that's fine. But that priority one is really, we're trying to limit you to take one dot and put it on one priority. Like if you could only have, like you probably have lots of things on the site, but if there was like a must-have for this site, could you pick one of those things? And Austin, I'm sorry to put you on the spot. I didn't tell you I was going to do this. Can you just read those so as they're going around the room, they can think of those like 5 things and start to think, what is that one priority that you want to see?
Yeah, so for the top priorities that we thought people might consider during this process, we want you to mark the one that you think is really the one that you couldn't do without. If this process comes through, what is one thing you really just need to see here? So there's publicly accessible open space, through connectivity to downtown, a commuter rail, and residential areas on all sides, creating new mixed-use and pedestrian-oriented streets, creating a diversity of housing options, including new affordable homes, and more commercial and light industrial real estate for new businesses.
And then the one dot, of course, won't say it all, right? So we also have the Post-it note board right behind where Austin is, so you can explain more and say, I put my dot on this, but I actually think these other things are super important to me. Does that make sense, what we're asking you to do? Okay, good. And I do have a chime, it's in my bag, I was going to show it to you, but you'll hear me. I'll tell you when you're about halfway through. We'll give you about a half hour, I think that should be plenty of time. It might not even take that long. Yes, please.
I'm having a hard time with the vision aspect versus the details in terms of, are we going to be looking at the impact to Reading, where the residents would incur and the different design goals and thought processes here? Because some of them are going to be more expensive for Reading than others in terms of the services, the schools. We have a lot of housing, multi-unit housing in Reading that have been built in the last few years. Do we need more of that?
Yeah, it's a
I don't know if we
it's
need
a
more of
good
that.
question.
Taxpayers.
It's a good question. And
Well, it's
so
mostly rental, so it's not taxpayers.
the short answer is,
It's mandated by the state to have enough affordable in town, so we have to keep
Have
it.
we reached that yet?
It doesn't matter. Once we reach it and people move in, then we do a census, then we have to do it again. And it's better to stay ahead, because if we don't stay ahead, then the 40B projects come in and do whatever the hell they want without zoning. If we stay ahead of it and we build based on our zoning, then we don't get these projects just thrown wherever they want. Like they did over with us for BP Lakeview, where they can do whatever they want. They work with us, but they could have done whatever they wanted, ruin 1,000 units if they wanted to.
Yeah, thank you, Matt.
Project.
So, the point is well taken. I think right now we just want to know what you want to see. And then as the project team develops alternatives, looking at what those impacts, and before zoning is written, certainly.
But I think
Yeah.
it's fine, like, for example,
Yeah.
on this residential density board, so we don't need any more large-scale multifamily projects. Feel free to write that if that's the way you feel about it, for whatever reason. But each one of us are going to be attending one of these stations, so you can ask us questions there as well. Probably should sort of start.
Yeah, we'll start. I'll take one more, Kyle.
Can you elaborate a little bit on what the reality is in terms of the current property owners, how much they are involved in this? And that in a way, we're not dealing with a blank slate where, a lot of this vision is like, oh, we just raise the entire field and begin new. That a lot of this should be, well, can you explain further that a lot of this is in relationship to dealing with much of what's existing?
Yeah, so we talked to the property owners pretty consistently, or as consistently as we can. We certainly did in 2019 when we started the original South of the Tracks District effort. Ultimately, they know that those sites are underutilized and that there's different opportunity there, right? Generally in development, they're looking at mixed-use opportunity, but solely it feels like they're focused on change and improvement there with us. And so whether or not our zoning reflects what they want, right, they can sell it to somebody who may develop what it is that we're writing for. So we can encourage what we're looking for and ultimately, hopefully entice them to one day present that opportunity to the town, whether that's the current property owners or future property owners who purchase that. But we are in talks with them. They're aware of this process. We'll re-engage with them throughout this process based on what we hear as town priorities and ultimately how that fits into the development world, right? We're not blind to impacts, right? There are impacts on housing, there's impacts on new development in general, but there are benefits too, and we're not going to keep that out of mind either. So it's just all about are you willing to sacrifice a little bit of housing growth for open space in the area? Are you willing to take job growth? What are you willing to see here? So it's a long-term game.
Okay, so when we come back, let's take more questions, but also if you have a question for us in the meantime, you can. But I want to make sure everyone has time to do the exercise, so why don't you go ahead and start, and I'll keep an eye on how people are doing. I'll give you probably about a half hour, but I'll let you know when we'll reconvene, and we'll do some report outs at the end. Thank you.
And then close to the.
It is a school board.
Yeah, but so what they're trying to do is scale. Now that means they work against you, they don't really have to. And that's what they're trying to get. They have the 12 towns.
How many hundreds of letters to every
Finding it those are physically working right now. I think I've built anything else. Once we
we are kicked off tonight. We're going to be making our
The town was that's the whole influence into the
it shifts.
we should
Sorry.
should be more difficult so that we would like to see rather than what's there now.
I don't think it's, I mean, the state has. And so that was a huge learning curve for all of us. Our neighborhood.
We're gonna be,
He doesn't now. He just wanted to. It's something to keep in mind. Which is why they feel space like this.
All these companies.
What we can do now is, all you can do now is say, my this is a good faith effort to get the towns, as you said, say, and how do we balance that for the long term? And you know, these are already have that list. So they are.
Thank you a lot for coming in. Looking forward to where the street is.
So what are the opportunities? That needs to change. A model that doesn't has more commercial, higher commercial tax base is a much better model for smoothing out your corner economic turbulence when that comes and helps buffer residential properties. So from my point of view, that would be
you're building right now.
yeah, buffer only.
in the corner.
And that's how you ride out economic ups and downs by having a more diverse tax base.
This is kind of why I was pushing with the.
Well, thanks for coming.
I told them about it.
I mean, this is Market Street, they're going up. People always talk about that. That was, I don't know if we were ready.
Now, why don't you try it a little bit on?
Yeah, Market Basket. Sorry, Whole Foods, because you mentioned it. Two residents on this. He said, oh, it's gonna be too much traffic. And you put it in town road to let people decide. You want this in the town, not just. No, but now, this gets to the other part. Yeah.
So each of these things has this is what is this here or 20 years later, let's be more versus sport versus more. I mean, more.
So this would be a
Small portion.
But again, it's probably still a size. Focus on what is Stop and Shop does, right? I don't know if that's especially on its own or if that's right, direct flooding, not full. Maybe soon or something to have that bridge over
Just to get the sign shown. It's coming on at 5.
This map.
Of course, only
promise that, but an email and so not here.
It's clear it's going to be all residential there, the way they're building it. Yes. I mean, there's got to be this right there. Yeah. Correct. Retail this side. So it looks like the next line is I don't think houses will be here because they're just going to open.
I hope we can continue. That's all I can do now, of course.
Yeah, that's all the way over. Please keep coming. You know, we do want the that's all. So there you go. Okay, so I kind of had to think about so this is an outlier amongst there. But really don't. So that's where the residential.
But something happened in they already built up. Try to offer
Around the side. But if it's, oh, well, the high-performing store too, they're not going to they're not going to be one, they're not going to want to go over there. They seem to be trying to, seems to be, yeah, everyone.
When the grocery anchors,
We want right at the table. They renamed but it's relatively, he was probably 10 years old now, brand new, and it's very big.
Tuscan Village, they built one huge one, along with these other two that were
a mile away.
the oldest ones around.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the point is you do a smaller test fit, open plan, and then attribute. That's what we hope to turn once you put.
I've been traveling a lot, so I'm going to a lot of
Yeah.
village. The beautiful area.
I know, I see it.
Right now, it's
Their diagrams
It's hard to write when you're increasing up right now. I did. I don't like it. Rather than retail or housing, how would you like the different impact? Worse, better. Same traffic.
How much of what did you go? No, my car next week. I go up and down. Yeah. Very hard. And then I'm like,
Yeah, they're known for
and also on the
Yeah.
in there.
I got a higher rating.
At the end of the day, there's no more talking about finding some relative in there, so they have to be within their service territory. They were actually looking at actually none of those don't work. Trying to do might be buy some land. My understanding is their conversations are more or less or relocate something else. Exactly. That would allow us to down in one sense. Get a bigger lot. Consolidate out the reality is that their projected as people electrify put in load is going up, so they will not 50%. There you go. I'm not sure.
Do you see this building? See this building here? That's them there. And they also own this one here, I think. And I don't know who owns that. Somebody else does. Yeah, there's a knife place as well.
One of those three. There's a couple of places in there. The knife guys want to stay. And unfortunately, they're talking about maybe they will they'll buy the yellow part and put it in there.
Really want to overeat what I
in other words, it's the right direction. I'm proposing something for
I think they can do a lot of
one of the first questions is what's the traffic and we're almost seeing development trucking down. You're starting off in the right direction.
Yeah, it's still makes
So that's what our movies like to be saying on that and not consolidation first. And if they might come by Cpdc and use this road right here.
Pond Meadow, yeah. So that would be ideal to have some truck access there.
Maybe it's just truck access. And it's not generally open. Possible.
Yeah, I think
He's at the light.
But I think they really, I think they
And that's why it's the driveway.
My understanding will be some conversation our members have had that for a while. It's like, oh, still talking about since our members. Actually, they're motioning their
this is
Like this Christmas now. Yeah, for a few months, just to kind of. That's figure out how to get us over it. It's not even if it's private. It's a warehouse. I mean, it's not complicated. I was wondering what that building was. Their driveway gets
Oh, okay. Did everybody get to do the priority one? Over here? So if you haven't done that, go ahead and do that one.
Everybody has one dot.
And then we'll learn a little bit about what you talked about.
Oh, that's in there? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right, good. So as we're waiting for the last folks to just finish that priorities, what I'd like to do, since our numbers dwindled a little bit, so I think what we can do is just have a few of you say, what are the main highlights of what you shared? We were gonna have each station person kind of sum it up, but I think at this point, we have such a small group at the end, we can have a little bit more intimate conversation. We have a few more minutes. I think we expected to have a stop at 8:30, but are people okay if we go to like 8:35 or so? Is that okay? All right, good. And then, also if you have questions, just let us know. We're here for that as well. So who wants to share? I'll take like maybe 4 people who want to share just some of the things that they, go ahead, Tara.
Limiting the sea of asphalt and making sure that developers handle parking themselves and not just relying on the streets for private parking.
Limiting the sea of asphalt, making sure that it's not, sorry, I couldn't hear the whole thing. Say that again?
Mostly just limiting the sea of asphalt.
Yeah, limiting the sea of asphalt, yeah, and I'm gonna try to repeat things because I know the mics are over here, so just wanna make sure that the cameras can get everybody. Great, thank you, Tara. Who else wants to contribute? Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
So, jump in. Green space, and kind of in a way that it can be used for events, sort of like what Wakefield does down by the lake. I would like to see that, because right now we do that over here in front of Town Hall, and it's not a big space. But if we could do something there, I'd love to see that nice walkways, particularly over the tracks, so people don't have to cross the tracks or walk to the street entrances, and walkways all the way down to the end where you can cross over to sort of where like the McDonald's or the Walgreens is, so they can get to connect to downtown.
So green spaces that you can really use and activate, walkways, crosses, pedestrian crossways over the rail. Yeah, great. Go ahead, Kyle.
So during COVID, there were a couple opportunities that popped up. We were able to pop up tech for Moon Restaurant. So that venue was really nice because it was at night, there was engagement, people were out and about. And I think something to think about is that nightlife as well for Reading, is an opportunity to create some other kinds of engagements, not just for the daytime park green life, but also for the wonderful nightlife that we could possibly have for the gathering.
So that's interesting. I was just talking with, is it Genna? A little bit about engaging other times of the day and what kind of uses can you activate, and you're talking about the nightlife and having uses that can really engage that nightlife. Yeah, great, thank you, Kyle. Go ahead, Mary.
I think making it feel like it's part of town. It's kind of like a no man's land.
Making it feel like it's part of town. It feels
so
like
close to town, it
isolated.
doesn't feel like part of town, so I think that's really important and make
Yeah.
it connected to it.
Yeah, it's close to town, but people don't really necessarily.
It's just on no man's land feel to it.
Yep. So making those kind of connections. Yeah.
It'll be interesting, if I may.
Go ahead.
It'll be interesting that, like Boston, you have different parts of town. So in a way, with the connection happening, this is another part of town that expands the town experience.
It could be, yeah, it could be another part of town, like a different district, but connected, but have a different character, maybe different set of uses.
Right.
Yeah. Go ahead, Genna.
So just a personal observation, when I was looking at different images that were presented to us, I kept being drawn to something that had walkability and green space as well as shade. Like that really popped for me.
So drawn to spaces with walkability, green space, and really the shade too, and looking at those images that show that.
You mean like it is today?
The sea of asphalt, yeah.
And they had bike paths in there too. It's tough to drive and ride a bike around Reading.
Bike paths. Mary?
And I think using the natural materials, places we've gone where it seems like cities are really using the stone and the wood that weathers nicely, it just ages well and it's inviting all seasons.
So on buildings, on structures,
Just the
on
natural materials.
right.
Hold up so well and look so nice.
Wood, stone,
Yeah.
it'll age well. So that could be part of the design guidelines, looking at what do buildings look like, what do structures look like.
Should it be passive
Tara?
house?
Passive house, very, very sustainable. Tara?
The third place without having to spend money either.
A third place, like a library? I don't know. What do you mean by third place? Yeah.
Just be like, so if I wanted to go and sit outside for a couple of hours
Yeah.
with my laptop or
Yeah.
or something, I can just walk down and sit down and not have to worry about,
Right.
oh, I need to buy it.
Don't need to buy a coffee to sit here. Yeah, some public spaces where you can hang out. You don't have to spend money to be there. Yeah, third place. Go ahead, Kyle.
There's a good example of Mill 5. I think everybody's just, if you don't know about Mill 5 in Lowell, they're getting kicked out of their building, it's a beautiful market inside of a building. One of the things that people lamented already is that there's already a loss of their safe place. A place where you just go, where you don't have to pay for anything, you don't have to buy anything, you just go in and hang. In a way, you have maybe a little bit of that with Cafe Nero. They don't push you out necessarily and stuff like that, but there's no place that's like that.
Yeah.
That was an indoor market space where you can just be.
Interesting. Okay. That's great. Indoor marketplace, another third space you can be. You're not pressured to buy something.
Right. Just gather.
What did people think? So I've heard things about open space, public amenities, third spaces, retail, nightlife, connectivity. I didn't hear anything about housing. What did people write on the housing and the mixed uses? What are people feeling about that? Does anybody? Yeah, Matt.
So I'm from Melrose, so you've seen downtown there. I like that style. It's 3 stories, sometimes 4, mostly 3. Business on the bottom, apartments above. And the look of the buildings, they're not flat square rectangular building, they have some detail work and on top. That's kind of like what I feel it would fit and work, because we have a lot of older buildings here, and that feels like that would fit in. Maybe you fix them up, but that's what I would see there. That's what I don't like about Linfield Marketplace, is you got that first section that's just businesses, one story, and that's it. And I feel like they wasted a lot of space with that. So for us, for this area, with the residential land, keep us ahead of the affordable issue with 40B and everything.
And Linfield, there's less sort of integration of the uses. They're
Yes.
more sort of
They're all from the back.
like traditional zoning almost.
Yeah, I mean, all the residential is way, and part of that I think was because of the way they built it. Because they built all the markets once, and it was like a couple years later when they built all the residential.
So you're thinking more like a traditional Main Street kind of feel, like it grew
Yeah.
organically. It looks like it grew organically. It has architectural detail. It has a couple stories above a shop or that kind of thing.
And even vary it. You go down to most downtowns now, you have one that's 3, one that's 4, might have one that's 2. Make it look.
Yeah, are you guys familiar with Gloucester downtown at all? Gloucester? I feel like that's like a variety, kind of a mix. Like there's a little bit 4-story, maybe 2-story, kind of mixed in.
I don't want any tall buildings. Like anything more than 4 is too much.
Anything more than what, 4? Yeah.
I think that's
John?
I think that residential housing should be at the bottom of the list of what gets put in there.
So you're more looking for like commercial,
I think we have
retail?
enough rentals, apartments, condos. I think we have enough of those already. I think we need more. The other dining, retail, open space, bike routes. I like his idea of the zoning not to be too high, the building.
Not to be
I
too
think we have
high.
enough people already.
Maybe focus on the commercial aspect, have some housing.
And then you do not incur extra dollars on the residential taxpayers by whatever you do here. That should be a goal to minimize the impact of the.
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes you might find that developers need the housing to make the commercial economic. It depends on what's going on in the market, but the housing is
If it can
typically
be kept at a minimum, that's
more in
not the
demand.
driving factor.
right. What do others think? I'm sorry, is it Jenna?
It's okay.
Jenna? Jenna.
I'm finding myself agreeing with Matt yet again. So I think mixed use strikes a really good balance between bringing in commercial as well as providing housing for folks. And there really seems to be 2 distinct styles of mixed use that I've observed in other towns, as well as here. It's the more modern approach that are popping up in another area, as well as the ones that are more organic. Closer to Boston, where it's just like red brick, 3 stories, dusty old bookstore living on the first floor, and some nice apartments on top. So that would be something that I would be interested in seeing being developed.
Yeah, so similar to what Matt said, kind of, or looks, even if it was developed all at the same time, looks more organic, sort of a Main Street feel, first store retail, a couple, 1 or 2 or 3 stories maybe on top. Yeah, go ahead. John?
This might be
Jake.
a better question for people who work for the town, but is this at all connected to the MBTA compliance?
No.
It is not. We have passed our 3A through town meeting. This is entirely whatever.
But I didn't know if that was connected to the residential part of the question.
I was just going to share that I just got through working on a project in Winchester, which actually James Olson did a master plan for. But this was the redevelopment of the North Main Street corridor. And at the same time, they were doing the MBTA Communities Initiative. And what they were really trying to do on the corridor is make it much more pedestrian-friendly, mixed-use feel, but the MBTA Communities access, you can do multifamily as of right. So we were working on the underlying zoning, whereas the MBTA community was an overlay. And what we tried to do was to provide incentives, like additional density, additional height, and things like that, to encourage the mixed-use development, because that's what really activates the ground floor and creates the streetscapes. So it's interesting; those 2 worlds definitely will overlap, but there's a way to handle each one of them.
Which, if I can, that's exactly what we've done downtown. You can't build multifamily housing by right downtown, but we've incentivized mixed use for the first floor commercial and affordable units out of it. So it's been a win on the commercial side and a win towards getting towards the 10% as SHI, and you could mimic that here in some capacity if you wanted to.
Great, so anything that wasn't said yet that someone wants to share about either something they wrote or something else they observed, or maybe their priorities? I see some dots back there. Yes, go ahead, Kyle.
I think it would be interesting, because this has long been kind of a more industrial area, jobs producing area, like what a modern mixed use version of that could look like. It's probably lighter industrial uses and maker spaces and that kind of thing, but integrating that into a development, so it's not necessarily just trying to recreate Market Street or whatever.
That's
like
interesting. So thinking about like how can light industry be integrated, maybe makerspace, things like that, in a way that is complementary and not just trying to mimic what you already have downtown.
Perhaps a more contemporary vernacular would go with that. I don't know. I did notice on the building design board that some people like the idea of maybe more contemporary feel to it, and others said, well, they really want to align with the downtown feel. So anyway, to be true.
Hold on, I saw John first, and then we'll go to that John, and then Kyle.
One other thing that I don't think anybody's mentioned is that we've been hearing a lot from town about our increasing 60-plus community. I think the 60-plus community is growing in town. And I think there's kind of a lack of kind of housing that people as they get older want to downsize into in town. So like single story, less stairs, no yards-ish, greatly on the driveway shovel. And I think this would be a good opportunity to add that sort of housing.
So looking at a growing older population, where can they downsize? Could this site be a good opportunity to build that kind of housing that might be convenient?
Classic demographics that you want to address. It's the empty nesters and it's the young professionals. And you've got a transit connection right there, and it also doesn't have as much of an impact on your schools and stuff. So there's lots of interesting opportunities there.
Great. John?
Are you looking at this from other angles too, in the sense that you out here soliciting what type of businesses, what type of, I guess types of businesses are looking to develop?
In terms of the market? I don't know that there's a market component to this.
There's not a market analysis.
Because if you had like 5 entities or 7 entities that said we're looking for some commercial space to build on, that could help determine, how much space that would require for you to design in, or whether it would be feasible. But there's another angle to come at this rather than just a community. The business side, look at the business side to see what would be available.
And the Economic Development Action Plan did have sort of certain suggestions on the number of restaurants and things like that, but of course it's tied into how much residential you're infusing into the area as well to support that. So
that's true. I think I saw Kyle first and then Kendrick.
I'm going to build on both what you were saying just now, and what Kyle, you were alluding to earlier, was a larger, potentially modern scale might address, I think, the other need that we have, the business side of the town. The other need that we have is the tax base. We need actually to think less residential in many respects, as much as we need residential, and we do need more elderly, retiring place, smaller scale downsizing. But that tax base is incremental to what we need as a community. Our taxes for our houses just go up. We missed out on the tax base with Linfield moving in next door. Instead of here, we would have had that for our ability to handle our school needs, fire department, police, and everything else. So as much as it feels like, yes, it's nice to have small homes, street light, I think this is a venue that we're thinking, and also these buildings are staying. Many of these buildings are going to remain here, and they got light industrial here. The reality is putting maybe a life science building in there would be ideal.
So look at impacts on the tax base and
that's been my
non-residential
main criteria.
Kendrick?
Well, I'm going to go off of this general theme about increasing businesses and what the zoning actually does. And it's my impression that if you were a large organization, national, whatever, you would hire some consultants or real estate people to look at a town and say, like, this is the zoning, this is what we put in there, and this is what we're trying to inform and design and influence, like saying, yeah, we're giving you space for it. If somebody wants to come in and look at it, here's what we want you to build.
That's right. The developers at the end of the day are going to figure out what the market at the time they're creating this will demand. Yep. Thank you, Kendrick. Anybody else want any last thoughts? All right, I think we'll go through next steps and then we can wrap up. Is that your slide? Oh, Andrew's up. Okay. Let me see if I can. There we go.
Great. So, right, we're going to collect your feedback, everything we've heard tonight. We need to continue on engaging the community in many different ways, whether it's more workshops like this, a town-wide survey, things of that nature. But ultimately, next steps are intended to collect as much feedback as possible so that we can do that district diagramming that Michael had shown early on, right? Those land use bubbles where they could naturally fit as a priority, if that's what we're hearing. Develop those even further, right? Engage on those, develop those even further into that master district plan concept of an actual layout of the site and what could naturally fit there. And ultimately present that to the community with the zoning recommendations. So I hear loud and clear that we definitely need to look at how much commercial space is there today, and if we can at least not lose commercial space, whether that's in mixed use or additional commercial development. That seems to be a priority. So we're going to take it all, look at it, look what we can advance on, and ultimately continue to engage with you guys and many others in the community and the town leaders to come up with that final plan. And so I appreciate everybody's input here tonight.
I'm going to just add that we are going to have different methodologies for engaging, and in addition to these types of meetings here, we're going to be producing, we're also going to do these focus groups where we'll have more sort of opportunities for one-on-one conversations, and then we'll do a survey once we start putting forward some ideas to get your feedback on that. So it'll be a multi-pronged approach.
One last question. Has it already been determined that if there's any new development that there's not going to be any issues with the ground? You know, in terms of hazardous waste or hazards that go with the ground?
Won't be on the town's end if there's environmental concerns, but we certainly know across the way the old landfill, and so.
And with the DPW being there?
Yeah. RMLD may or may not have their own challenges with that, but ultimately that's not on the town's dime if there's any concerns. So.
How does this fit in with the Walker's Brook redesign?
So the Walker's Brook redesign is a simultaneous effort we're about to kick off. We are trying to finalize the grant award with the state. Once they confirm we're MBTA communities compliant, its design consideration is going to tie into, right, the connection points from Walker's Brook Drive and what that looks like to either activate Walker's Brook itself or activate any type of through there like General Way is today. So the site layout will factor that in, but it is a separate, yet certainly directly connected effort.
And as we begin to vet certain concepts, we have, that engineering component on our team as well to begin to think about the interface. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.